What's up, folks, and welcome back to Organized Chaos, and this is episode 41. Today, I'm going to walk you through why your onboarding process is costing you serious money and exactly how to fix it.
Right.
Here's the math that should get your attention. Poor onboarding costs you over $50,000 per mid-level hire in lost productivity alone. And that's not counting turnover costs or the opportunity cost of the work your new hires never completed. But what makes it worse is that confused new hires don't just slow themselves down. They create a spiraling effect around them that really drains your best people. Your existing employees end up compensating for the gap, which means you're now burning capacity on both ends. I'm going to show you the three failure modes that kill onboarding at startups and the shared accountability model that fixes it. Now, before we dive in, I want to quickly update you on the Startup HR Operating System, my flagship course that went into early access 3 weeks ago. In the last episode, I shared that I had opened 50 early access spots and 30 had been claimed at the time of the recording. But since then, demand has exceeded my expectations, and 61 people have requested access. Because of that interest, I've decided to open an additional 50 seats, bringing the total to 100. So, as a reminder, this course is my full playbook for helping startups scale their people operations. It is the same system I use with my clients. Early access currently includes 3 of the 13 modules that the course will include. If you'd like to join and take the course for a test drive, you'll find the link in the show notes. Now, back to this week's topic, onboarding. So, let me start with the numbers because they are brutal. Organizations with strong onboarding improve new hire retention by 82% and productivity by over 70%. That's according to a study by the reputable Brandon Hall Group. And those aren't marginal gains. Those are the kind of numbers that directly impact your runway and growth trajectory. So let's break down what poor onboarding actually costs you. If you hire a 120K per year engineer and they take 8 months to reach full productivity instead of 3 months, you have just wasted a lot of money for those additional 5 months of ramp up time. Let's say the engineer started their first month at 30% productivity and then increased that by 10% for the next 7 months. That's $28,000 in money you burned. In other words, you paid for approximately 3 additional months of salary during that ramp up period. And that's before we even talk about the opportunity cost of features that didn't get built, customers you didn't close, or bugs that didn't get fixed. Time to productivity is the metric that actually matters here. Every extra month of ramp time is money you're lighting on fire. And most startups don't even track this number, which means they have no idea how much time, money, and opportunities they're losing. But it gets worse because of the multiplier effect. Poor onboarding doesn't just hurt the new hire, it creates a time drain on your tenured people who have to compensate. Your tech lead, who should be architecting systems, is instead answering basic questions that should have been covered in week one. Your product manager, who should be talking to customers, is instead explaining company strategy that should have been documented. So, what should you expect from good onboarding? Specifically, 3 measurable outcomes: shorter time to productivity, higher retention rates, and improved employee engagement. These are metrics that directly translate to faster output velocity, lower recruiting costs, and better team morale. Growing startups tend to ignore this because they're focused on hiring fast. They're optimizing for offer acceptance and time to start instead of optimizing for time to impact. That's just backwards. And there's a false economy at play here. I hear this all the time. We don't have time to onboard properly. In reality, that lack of time means you're going to spend 3x that time fixing mistakes, rehiring when people leave, and compensating for productivity gaps. You're not saving time, you're just deferring the cost and making it worse. Let me put this in perspective. If you're hiring 20 people this year at an average salary of $100,000 and poor onboarding adds 3 months of salary due to ramp time, That's $500,000 in lost productivity. $500,000. That is not a rounding error. That kind of number has material impact on your burn rate and your ability to hit milestones. And that's still not counting turnover. When people leave because they never felt set up to succeed, you're now paying recruiting fees, interview time, and another ramp cycle for their replacement. So the costs are compounding. So, what's actually breaking your onboarding? Let me walk you through the three failure modes I always see. The first failure mode is what I call the checklist trap, meaning that your onboarding is laptop setup, Slack access, email account, and HR portal login. It's pure administration with zero context. The new hire gets processed like they're going through airport security, but they have no idea why they're here or what success actually means. This problem starts before you even hire. It starts with unclear role outcomes. If you're not clear on why this role exists and what success looks like in 30, 60, and 90 days, you can't create purposeful onboarding. It's just impossible. You end up defaulting to administrative busy work because you don't know what else to include. What you end up with is a new hire who feels processed instead of prepared. They've got all their accounts set up, but they don't understand who your customers are, why you win deals, or what the unwritten rules are for how decisions get made around here. Those are the things that actually matter for ramping up quickly. The fix requires going upstream. Before you post the job, before you write the job description, you need to define what good looks like at each milestone. What does success look like in the first 30 days? What will this person own by day 90? Who are the 5 people they need to build relationships with immediately? If you can't answer those questions, you're just not ready to hire. Real onboarding is about transmitting context. It's answering the questions that let someone make good decisions independently. Here's how we think about our market. Here's why we chose this tech stack over alternatives. Here's how we prioritize when everything's on fire. That's the stuff that turns a new hire into a productive team member. Here's the test I personally use. If your onboarding plan could apply to any company in your industry, it's not specific enough. Generic onboarding produces generic results. Your onboarding should be so specific to your company that someone couldn't use it anywhere else. So when I see a manager hand me an onboarding plan that's just a list of tools and access permissions, I just send it back. That's not onboarding. It's just the basic IT setup. Onboarding is when you transfer the context and frameworks that let someone operate effectively in your specific environment. Before I jump into the second failure mode, understand this. The checklist trap happens because of lazy thinking upstream. You didn't do the work to define what success looks like, so you filled the void with administrative tasks. Fix the upstream problem, and the onboarding plan writes itself. Now let's talk about the second failure mode. And this one drives me up a wall because it is so avoidable. How many times have you heard a hiring manager say this? We need someone who can hit the ground running. We don't have time to hold their hand. They need to figure it out. Let me be blunt about this. If you're a manager and you cannot find time to ramp up your new joiner, you're a lousy manager. I don't say that to be harsh. I say it because it's true and someone needs to tell you. Because this is not a capacity problem, it's a skill and organization problem. This means that you as a manager can't get out of the weeds, which means you're spending time on things you shouldn't be doing in the first place. You're stuck in execution mode when you should be in leverage mode. And now you're about to make it worse by bringing on someone who will flounder because you won't invest the time up front. There's this weird badge of honor in startup culture around sink or swim. Like somehow making people struggle is character building. Unless you're hiring a seasoned startup veteran who's done this before at your exact stage at a similar company, you're just making their life harder for no reason. And that's stupid because of how much it costs. Remember that $28,000 of productivity loss I mentioned in my opening example? This is where it comes from. This is the failure mode that creates it. A manager who doesn't have time to onboard is about to either micromanage because they don't trust the person or ignore them completely because they're just too busy. Both of these paths lead to the same place: turnover within 12 months and another recruiting cycle. Congratulations. So here's the accountability rule I enforce. Hiring is a privilege, not a right. If a manager cannot produce a 30, 60, 90-day plan that defines success, not just tasks, then the headcount gets revoked. And I'm dead serious about this. If you can't articulate what good looks like at each milestone and how you're going to support the person getting there, you don't get to hire. The logic for me is simple. A manager who doesn't have time to onboard isn't ready to manage another person. They're already underwater, and adding headcount will just create more problems. Now, let's be clear about what having time actually means. I'm not asking for some massive time commitment here. I'm talking about blocking 2 hours in week one for context setting, 1 hour per week for check ins in month one, then decreasing to biweekly by month three. That's the baseline. If you can't commit to that, you're just not ready. And here's the forcing function that makes this work. Make the manager write the onboarding plan before you approve the offer letter, not after the person accepts and not on their first day, before the offer goes out the door. Because if they can't write it then, they definitely won't have time once the person starts. Doing that forces clarity. It forces the manager to think through what success looks like and how they'll support it. And it gives you a clear signal about whether this manager is ready to grow their team. Now let's move on to failure mode number 3. And this one is more subtle, but just as deadly. Here's something that I'm sure you've heard founders and managers say as much as I have. We're a startup. We need people who can operate autonomously with little to no supervision. We can't babysit. We need self-starters who figure things out. This is carrying dysfunction like a badge of honor, and it is just costing you money. Every company has its own way of operating. Assuming people will just figure it out is lazy management dressed up as startup culture. There's a false dichotomy at play here. People think structure means bureaucracy. They think onboarding means handholding, but that's not what good onboarding does. Good onboarding actually enables faster autonomy because the person understands context and decision making frameworks. They can make good decisions independently because you've given them the mental models to do so. And here's the startup specific advantage you're missing. You can onboard people into your actual decision making process, not just provide corporate theater that larger companies do. You can show them how you really make build versus buy decisions, how you really prioritize when everything's on fire, how you really communicate bad news. That's powerful because it's authentic and it's useful. But if you don't explicitly onboard people into how we work here, they'll import habits from their last company. And that creates a cultural transmission problem. Every new hire who imports the wrong operating model will create friction that will keep compounding as you scale. Let me give you an example. You hire someone from a big tech company where every decision requires 3 levels of approval. They bring that habit with them. Now they're slowing down your fast moving team because they're asking for permission when they should be making the calls. It's not their fault. That's your fault for not onboarding them into your decision making culture. Or if you hire someone from a chaotic early stage startup where documentation didn't exist, they bring that habit with them. Now they're not writing anything down, and the next person who joins has to start from zero again. Same problem, different manifestation. This matters in hypergrowth because these imported habits will just multiply. The first 10 people are going to set your culture. The next 50 are going to amplify whatever those 10 people were doing. If you don't explicitly onboard people into your operating model, you lose control of your culture. Now, to fix this, simply document your decision making frameworks and make them part of week one onboarding, not in some employee handbook that nobody reads. In real examples, here's a decision we made last month. Here's the framework we used. Here's why we chose option A over option B. That's how you transmit culture at scale. So now that you know what's breaking, let me give you the accountability model that fixes it. Onboarding is a 3-way contract between HR, the manager, and the new hire. Each party owns specific outcomes. When one party drops the ball, the entire system fails. So let's break down who owns what. HR's role is to design an onboarding framework that consistently applies across the company. Notice I said framework, not script. HR creates the structure. What happens in week one? What milestones exist at 30, 60, and 90 days? What the feedback loops look like? Think of this as the scaffolding or foundation that every team uses. HR is the quality control function within this context. They solicit feedback from managers and employees to detect red flags early. If multiple new hires are saying the same thing went wrong, that's a signal. If a manager consistently has new hires who struggle to ramp, that's a pattern. HR's job is to catch these patterns and take proactive action before they become expensive problems. Now, let's talk about the manager's role because this is where accountability really matters. The manager applies that HR framework within the context of their team and ensures execution. The manager owns onboarding for their team and is ultimately accountable for whether the new hire succeeds. The manager, as I mentioned earlier, creates the 30, 60, 90-day success plan. What does good look like at each milestone? What decisions will this person be making independently by day 90? What relationships need to be built? The manager blocks time for context setting and check ins and introduces the new hire to key stakeholders, not just in Slack, making real introductions with context. Here's why you need to know this person. Here's what they can help you with. Here's how you'll work together. That's relationship building, and it's the manager's job to facilitate it. The new hire has a role too. They're not a passive recipient of onboarding, they're an active participant with their own accountability. The new hire keeps track of milestones and asks questions to ensure alignment. If something isn't clear, they flag it. If they're not sure what success looks like at day 30, they should ask. If they don't understand a decision that was made, they should seek clarification. This is proactive ownership of their own onboarding. New hire responsibilities include proactively scheduling check ins if the manager drops the ball, flagging confusion early instead of waiting until it becomes a problem, taking ownership of their learning instead of expecting to be spoon fed everything. This matters because autonomy is earned through demonstrated competence. The new hire who asks good questions and takes ownership of their ramp up, they just earn trust faster. The new hire who waits around for instructions will stay in supervised mode for a much longer time. Now, here's the forcing function that makes this whole system work, and one that I use religiously. Tie manager performance to new hire ramp time and retention. If a manager's new hires consistently take longer to reach productivity than the company average for comparable roles, that's a performance issue. If a manager's new hires leave within the first year at higher rates than peers, that's a management problem. This change to manager performance measurement treats hiring as the strategic investment it actually is. Managers who are good at onboarding should be rewarded. Managers who consistently fail at it should lose hiring privileges until they fix their process. But how do you implement this? Start with a simple 30, 60, 90 template that every manager must complete before a new hire's first day. The template should answer four simple questions. What does success look like at each milestone? What are the 3 to 5 key relationships this person needs to build? What are the decision rights at each stage? And what does the employee need to learn at each stage to be successful? This approach forces clarity and nudges the manager to think through the ramp up process, and it gives HR something concrete to evaluate. Then you build in the feedback loop. HR checks in with new hires at day 10, day 30, and day 60 to catch problems early. Don't just send a survey, have an actual conversation. How's it going? Is your manager giving you what you need? Are the milestones clear? Where are you confused? These check ins serve two purposes. They give the new hire a safe channel to raise concerns, and they give HR early warning signals when something's off. Finally, you need an escalation path. If a new hire isn't hitting milestones, HR and the manager jointly troubleshoot. Is it a skill gap? Did we hire the wrong person? Is it a clarity gap? Does the person not understand what's expected? Or is it a manager gap? Is the manager not providing the support they committed to? That diagnosis determines the intervention. Skills gap means additional training or a performance plan. Clarity gap means the manager needs to reset expectations. Manager gap means HR needs to coach the manager or escalate to their leader. This shared accountability model works because no one can hide. The new hire can't blame the manager if they're not asking questions. The manager can't blame the new hire if they didn't create a clear plan. And HR can't blame either if they're not checking in and catching problems early. Now, let me close with how to sell this to founders who think they and their leaders don't have time for this. The best way to get a founder's attention is to show them how something impacts their bottom line. So let's do the math one more time. If you're hiring 20 people this year at an average salary of 100,000 US dollars and poor onboarding adds 3 months to ramp time, that's $500,000 in lost money. And again, we're not even counting the cost of turnover when people leave because they never felt set up to succeed. Now let's look at the upside. That Brandon Hall Group study I mentioned at the beginning of the show found 82% improvement in retention and 70% improvement in productivity from strong onboarding. If you could get half those gains, you'd save hundreds of thousands in rehiring costs and lost output. The ROI is obvious when you put it in those terms. Investing time in onboarding isn't nice to have. It has a serious financial impact. Here's what I recommend. Make hiring managers accountable for onboarding outcomes in their performance reviews. If a manager's new hires consistently take longer to ramp or leave within the first year, that manager loses hiring privileges. Again, this isn't about being harsh. It's about treating hiring as the strategic investment it actually is. Your onboarding process is either a force multiplier or a money pit. There is no middle ground here. You're either setting people up to succeed quickly or you're burning cash on extended ramp times and turnover. Well, that's it for this episode, and I'll see you on the next one.